The founders of the Oregon Community Foundation, OCF, believed that Oregonians around the state could come together to help improve the quality of our lives. That belief has been borne out by the tremendous growth of the foundation, reflecting the generosity not of just one person, but of thousands of donors. Today, OCF President Max Williams will discuss the changing role of the foundation as it adapts to the increasingly complex challenges facing our state. Max Williams is President and CEO of the Oregon Community Foundation, which he joined in early 2012. Under his leadership, the foundation manages the stewardship of charitable funds that are distributed statewide. Additionally, he's responsible for overseeing the $1.1 billion endowment, which is comprised of more than 1,600 permanent funds. Max was previously director of the Oregon Department of Corrections from 2004 until 2011. He was appointed by Governor Ted Kulongoski following a career in the Oregon Legislative Assembly, where he served in various leadership roles. He was also a practicing attorney for more than 12 years at the Portland law firm of Miller Nash. And with that, please help me welcome today's speaker, Max Williams.
Well, thank you very much for this kind of invitation to speak to the City Club. I have to say that 5 months into my tenure as the OCF president, it's a bit humbling to be asked here to talk about the future of philanthropy and community philanthropy in Oregon. But what I get to do with you today is to tell you an amazing Oregon story, for which I actually don't deserve any of the credit. I'm going to talk to you about what makes the Oregon Community Foundation uniquely positioned to make a difference for Oregon. And I'm going to share with you only some of the many programs and efforts that we have made and are making to meet our mission of improving life in Oregon and promoting effective philanthropy. But first, I'd like to invite you to travel back in time with me, if you will, to 1973. Most of us here, I think, can remember what 1973 was. There are a few maybe that can't. But in 1973, I was 10 years old. I was attending the 5th grade elementary at Kenwood School in Bend, Oregon, where I was born and raised. My favorite TV programs were The Partridge Family and The Waltons. I don't know if you remember those. But nationally, if you think about what was going on in 1973, Oregon was dealing with the oil crisis and OPEC and long lines at the gas pump. The Watergate hearings had started. My recollection of Watergate was that it preempted Gilligan's Island in the afternoon. It was also the end of the Vietnam War. Inflation was running high, and as a nation, we were on our way into a very significant recession. In Oregon, however, 1973 was a time period that many might call the golden age in terms of politics and policy. It was the last full year of Governor McCall's second term. We'd been through the Willamette River cleanup efforts, the beach bill, the bottle bill, and in 1973, the Oregon legislature passed landmark bill, Senate Bill 1, that instituted Oregon's first in the nation land use law to protect high-value farm and forest lands. It was a time of tremendous focus on making Oregon a better place for Oregonians. Interestingly, when national cynicism was running very, very high, there was great hope and excitement for the future of Oregon. Amidst all this activity in Oregon, in September of that year, a small group gathered at the Georgia Pacific Building here in downtown Portland and quietly formed a very remarkable organization, the Oregon Community Foundation. Those carefully selected founders of OCF came from different backgrounds and from different areas across the state. They included people like William Swindells, chairman of Willamette Industries, who was really the person who was spearheading the OCF effort. Otto Frohnmeyer, a lawyer from Medford and the father of Dave Frohnmeyer. Stafford Hansel, a hog farmer, political bridge builder, and state legislator from Hermiston. Lee Johnson, Oregon's then Attorney General. Dr. Elizabeth Lobitz, a Portland doctor and community activist, and several others. Now, the old expression that behind every good man there is a good woman is no different with the creation of OCF. It was actually Jean Doyle, Mr. Swindells' sister-in-law, who had pushed hard for the creation of the Oregon Community Foundation. Jean had been involved while living in San Francisco in the San Francisco Community Foundation, and she encouraged its formation and for Mr. Swindells to start a foundation like it in Oregon. He had been a little busy running Willamette Industries and hadn't gotten around to doing it, and Jean herself paid for the initial legal work in order to get the foundation up and running. It started with the first contribution by Mr. Swindells of $63,000 to make it both real and operational. The founding board of directors recognized the strength of the concept of community foundations, that by coming together, not only would the collective investments be stronger, but the impact would be deeper and the ability to bridge traditional divides, including geography, would be greater. What's remarkable is that they saw the great value in the making of the Oregon Community Foundation, creating a statewide organization that could serve all corners of the state, connect Oregonians across these varied geographies. It was a realization that for Oregon to be strong, Oregon communities and the people that lived in them needed to be strong and well connected. In the first annual report, they described what they had in mind for the Oregon Community Foundation. Our goal, they said, is to attract, receive, and hold principal funds and distribute the income for a broad variety of educational, charitable, civic improvement purposes throughout the state of Oregon. It is not our intention to compete with existing charitable organizations for their usual annual support, but rather to supplement their activities and to become their friend and ally. And this statement still holds true today. Since that founding, Oregonians have built the Oregon Community Foundation into an incredible resource for our state. It is the 6th largest community foundation in the nation, with more than 1,700 individual funds, more than $1.2 billion in endowment, and more than 1,600 volunteers from 8 regions all across Oregon. And with this endowment, the impact has been tremendous. We have made from that very founding time more than $770 million in grants across all of Oregon, doing exactly what that early group of founders of this quiet little organization had intended when they formed it in 1973. Just last year, the Oregon Community Foundation made $80 million in grants and almost $7 million in scholarships. It is, in fact, a tremendous Oregon success story. But it may be that I've got the cart before the horse for some of you. Some of you may be asking, what is a community foundation, and how is it different from private philanthropy or private foundations? Or you also may be asking the question, isn't philanthropy really something only for the super rich? Well, though we may think of noted philanthropists, people like the Andrew Carnegies or the Bill Gates of the world, when we think of philanthropy, the word implies more than just the giving of large sums of money. It's actually from the Greek word, meaning love of mankind. And I like that idea and that definition, that to be a philanthropist is actually a much broader term. If you use your resources to help someone else, either with money or with time, or even bringing your alien neighbor a dinner when they're sick, you are giving of your talents to help your fellow man, and it makes you a philanthropist. Community foundations have almost a century of history. In 1914, Frederick H. Goff started the Cleveland Foundation, which was the first in the nation, believing that people of modest means should be able to pool their philanthropic contributions for better effect. Today, there are more than 730 community foundations serving urban and rural communities throughout the United States. And the Oregon Community Foundation is unique in that we are one of the few statewide community foundations, and we are stronger for it. Although these foundations may differ in some respects, they have deep roots in community. They multiply the impact of donations by pooling those dollars with other donations and grants. They help donors achieve their charitable giving goals, and they build endowment funds that will benefit the community forever. Simply explained, it means that individuals like most of us, of modest means, have an available vehicle and structure to structure our long-term charitable giving and planning, both while we are living and after we pass away. Being part of a community foundation has all the benefits of being in a pooled investment with low cost of administration and operation, with staff expertise working with nonprofit partners for effective charitable giving, and the strongest set of tax advantages to encourage and inspire greater charitable giving and community impact. It provides all the benefits, essentially, of a private foundation for an individual donor and little of the expense, legal, accounting, or management issues. as the title of my remarks suggested, why should the billionaires have all the fun? When you're part of OCF, you can be part of a billion-dollar foundation, part of a billion-dollar endowment, and you are actively involved in giving to the organizations and causes that you believe will improve the lives of Oregonians. But I submit that community philanthropy, as represented by OCF, is far more than creating warm and fuzzy feelings or just simply tax advantages. I believe that community philanthropy and the work of OCF represents one of the best approaches for mending our fractured civil discourse, moderating the extreme nature of political process, and in fact helping restore public culture and our central value that the belief that we are dependent on each other is so important. To survive and thrive, we must rely on each other. We are truly all in this together. Of course, this is not a new value or a new concept. More than 200 years ago, Alexis de Tocqueville, on his travels across America, noted that the health of a democratic society may be measured by the quality of functions performed by private citizens. Now, the author Wallace Segner has described our region of the country as the geography of hope. The notion of hope for the future, of optimism, of the ability to forge one's destiny. It's what brought people through the challenging uncertainties and the harsh realities of the Oregon Trail. And still it captures the imagination of Oregonians no matter when or how your family came to Oregon. But as much as I am an optimist and believe in the promise of Oregon, I'm not blinded to the challenges that we face as a state. 3 terms in the Oregon legislature and 8 years running the Department of Corrections have made me abundantly aware of the challenges that we face as Oregonians. The structural challenges, economic and geographical challenges, the significant demographic challenges that we have, and a loss of trust and confidence in institutions to resolve problems. There is hardly a category of Oregonians in our state that isn't facing some challenge, and some much more dramatically than others. And you know this list as well as I do. High unemployment, declining wages compared to national averages, services to Oregon's most vulnerable families and individuals that have been dramatically reduced, investment in education at all levels, which is continually threatened and has declined as a share of total public investment. There's political divisiveness at the local level and the state level, and strong disagreement among Oregonians about what's most important and what matters. An urban-rural divide that continues to fail to recognize our common concerns, and a winner-take-all mentality in elections when one looks at the narrow outcomes and clearly knows that it is a call for compromise as opposed to strict ideology. We have deep disagreements as a state about tax structure, immigration policy, the influence of money in politics, PERS reform. We have rural counties that are stumbling towards bankruptcy, national or natural resource policy debates that are bogged down in all corners of Oregon, and an achievement gap in education that is both disappointing and discouraging. And for everything that I've just listed, that laundry list is even worse and more complicated if you belong to one of Oregon's minorities. And yet, even as technology theoretically brings the world closer, it magnifies our problems. It challenges the very sense of place that is one of the elements of community. It allows for simultaneously more contact and greater isolation, the narrow banding of information and dialogue, thus making wedges between us deeper and more pronounced. So where then does community philanthropy fit into this picture? What can OCF do to help solve these problems and be at this table? I'd submit that we have a combination of tangible and intangible resources that are highly distinctive. And while I don't believe that OCF or broad philanthropy can solve all of our problems, I would submit to you that we have a very important role to play. Let me give you 3 distinct areas that I think are worthy of our consideration. First, philanthropy has money, a permanent endowment that allows us to take the long view and that provides us with flexible cash, not enough to grant our way to solving all of our problems, but enough to research, to propose innovations, and to convene partners. Second, we have broad networks. We are part of the fabric of the very communities we're talking about, from our donors to our boards, to our leadership councils and our volunteers, to the nonprofits and the school districts, the churches and other faith-based organizations, businesses and public agencies that we are engaged with all over Oregon to help solve problems. And third, we have credibility. Surveys suggest that there is a significantly higher level of public trust in nonprofit and philanthropic sectors than in either government or business. We have no political, ideological axe to grind, and our donors themselves hold diverse views and yet have like-minded motives to improve Oregon and to improve outcomes. The combination of money, networks, and credibility gives us the opportunity to renew the geography of hope, one based on the ways that people interact within our communities and around our state. Let me describe for you a few ways that OCF is deploying this combination of resources to make differences. First, we'll talk a little bit about money. I do think it's important to acknowledge that philanthropy will never be of a size or level to replace major social safety net funding. But an article in the Financial Times recently argued that we may be on the cusp of a great wave of expanded philanthropy, owing to a combination of a group of retiring baby boomers at almost 10,000 persons a day, a socially engaged younger generation, wealth creation over the last 25 years, and innovation as the driving force in the American economy. It pointed to two very interesting examples that I'm sure many of you are aware of. America's richest man, Bill Gates, decided that it was more important to spend full-time on philanthropy than to run the company that he had founded. And America's second richest man, Warren Buffett, rejected the tradition of giving away all his money at the time of his death in favor of giving it away now and giving it to the Gates Foundation. They've also initiated a campaign to persuade America's wealthiest families to devote 50 to 100% of their fortunes to philanthropy. And here in Oregon, there are equally wonderful examples of deeply committed individuals and families, the Schnitzers, the Hamptons, the Swindells, the Grays, and many others that have followed in that same tradition and have dramatically given back to Oregon in a variety of ways. Most recently, and the most notable, has been Fred Fields, who I'm sure many of you are aware recently left a $150 million bequest to OCF to use as a permanent endowment to support education and the arts in Oregon. That happened about my third week on the job. It is spectacular and it is humbling. Can I just take a minute and tell you a little bit about Fred? Fred Fields was a self-made man, a World War II vet, a hard worker who went to school and attended several different colleges but never graduated. He was innovative, he was driven, and he was generous. Along with his bequest to OCF, he and his wife Suzanne were generous in life. And at the time of his passing, he left over $30 million in specific bequests to organizations he believed in and supported. And in addition to this remarkable gift to OCF, the gift to OCF, in fact, is the largest single bequest ever to the Oregon Community Foundation and may well be the largest single gift to any institution in Oregon's history. His gift will give to Oregon long after all of us have moved on. It is a remarkable act of generosity, and our board is seriously considering how to honor that stewardship. We've started a process of considering how we will approach and manage this gift to Oregon, and I know there's a lot of interest in this gift. I have been increasingly popular as of late. Way more popular than I was when I ran the prison system. And as our board works through this process, we'll have more information for all of you who are interested in what we intend to do and how we intend to manage this gift later in the year. But the truth is, the vast majority of us are not Fred Fields. So how can the rest of us use the same values effectively to support those in need and drive necessary change in Oregon? We should remember the old proverb that it's not the towering sail, but the unseen wind that moves the ship. The strength of a community foundation lies in its ability to bring people together of both great and modest means. OCF currently has more than 700 advised funds under management. Regardless of the size, all of them give the advisors the ability to build endowments and at the same time advise on grants for the causes that they themselves are passionate about. And by the way, we have quite a few donors who are passionate about the City Club. For example, Tom and Chris Nielsen set up the Nielsen Family Fund with a gift of stock from their privately held family business. And that fund has not only helped the City Club, but OPB and the World Affairs Council and the Portland Art Museum, to name just a few. And there are many other similar donors with wide and varying interests using the tools at OCF to support where they believe their charitable giving will make a difference. But just as modest funds established by caring people can have an impact far beyond their bottom line, it is also true with grants. Many of OCF's most important grants over time have not been large, but they can be catalytic. A small grant can be translated by local ingenuity and hard work into huge community assets. Leveraging and partnering are key concepts in all of our grant making, and let me offer you a few examples. Beginning in the 1960s, all over small towns, theaters that had been the centerpiece of their communities had begun to close and begun to deteriorate. This was often a bellwether of the decline of the local Main Street. The Liberty Theater in Astoria was one of these theaters. The community knew that reviving the theater was important to the future of their town, but they didn't have the funds to get started. OCF provided a grant that hired a consultant who put together a plan which jump-started a community-wide effort of restoring the Liberty Theater. From Astoria to Klamath Falls, from Medford to Bend, from Corvallis to Salem, OCF grants have helped kickstart local community efforts to restore these historic downtown theaters, hallmarks of community vitality. And as a result, these communities have seen an increase in civic pride, enhanced cultural opportunities, and a boost in economic activity. I've seen it as I've traveled around the state in these last 5 months, what these incredible assets are, these public spaces that develop theater, dance, music in these communities and as gathering places for citizens in those towns to come together one with another. On a more individual level, OCF scholarship awards have had the same catalytic impact on individuals. OCF has almost $100 million in scholarship endowment, and it is having a catalytic impact on those students one at a time as they pursue and gain access to higher education. Last year, over 2,200 students in Oregon received the benefit of an OCF scholarship established by some generous Oregonian. These are students who have benefited from these funds that have given them both access and the affordability of education, which we know are the two large barriers to students who are wanting to pursue their educational plan. OCF has been catalytic when it comes to the role of developing affordable housing in Oregon. The Neighborhood Partnership Fund was created by OCF to revitalize low-income neighborhoods through community organizing and affordable housing development. The fund pooled the resources of many funders, eventually becoming its own 501c3, Neighborhood Partnerships, and it is now a major advocate for housing policy change throughout the state, winning tens of millions of federal dollars and building alliances between the real estate, the lending, and the construction industries, and increasing the availability and accessibility of Oregonians for housing for Oregonians across the state. Now, the list is long. I can tell you in the 5 months that I have served, I have had numerous individuals and nonprofits come to me and tell me how OCF's early grant kickstarted their efforts, provided an early endorsement of their plan that brought in other funds and allowed them to become more sustainable and stable in accomplishing their community goals. In so doing, we collectively are improving the lives of Oregonians. As I said, one of the ways we believe we can be effective is, and that we are unique in, is our ability to work with partners and be community focused. In building these partnerships and networks across a variety of sectors, we work with volunteers, donors, and other foundations to leverage our efforts. One important example of this that some of you may be aware of is OCF's work on the Chalkboard Project. Founded with our partner foundations, the Meyer Trust, the Collins, Miller, Ford Family, and Jeldwin Foundation, and now 10 years later, almost 50% of Oregon's school children are benefiting by Chalkboard's innovative work in school districts around Oregon, work that's involved in training teachers and improving the quality and effectiveness of classroom instruction. The effort, research, and collaboration that went into developing the Chalkboard Project and its objective to improving the K-12 outcomes is a tremendous example of the role that philanthropy has played and can continue to play in working to try to address Oregon's big challenges. Today, Chalkboard's list of supporters and partners has dramatically expanded and represent private, public, and corporate philanthropy, all dedicated to helping narrow Oregon's educational achievement gap. In the future, I am certain that we will see expanding collaboration among foundations and funders in Oregon and the region to work in more coordinated ways and to achieve that collective impact. Obviously, the point of this work is to improve outcomes, and to the extent that we can focus our resources, avoid duplication, and target the most effective and promising practices, we have the chance to make the biggest difference and move the needle on that list of challenges that face our state. I could share similar stories about OCF's efforts in supporting early childhood education, in giving early and providing ongoing support to relief nurseries around the state, and in supporting the efforts to develop parenting curriculum and the organizations around Oregon who provide those resources to families and communities. For more than 20 years, OCF has worked with our partners around the state on the priority of strengthening families, improving parenting, and protecting at-risk children. Our early childhood programs are all focused on those efforts. Now, I can tell you from my own personal experience, interestingly enough, of what it looks like at the back end of a system where these programs are not in place. Having managed the system of our prisons for 8 years, there are a great number of people in that system who have come from family circumstances whose traditional and common early childhood supports were not present. These offenders were in many cases the victims of abuse or neglect themselves. They all had the family risk factors and the markers that we know increase the likelihood of bad outcomes: lack of early attachment, lack of school readiness, poor academic performance, antisocial behaviors, engagement in the foster care system, the juvenile justice system, and then ultimately the adult prison system. Not only are these tragic outcomes for the individuals and families, they are costly outcomes for the state. They increase our taxes. They cause us to spend money in places that we would rather not spend. They create more victims of crime. They perpetuate the intergenerational cycle of crime and abuse and of poor parenting. A large number of the individuals in prison come to prison already as parents, becoming parents early in life, and they continue to parent after they're released from prison, and the cycle often repeats itself. This is one of the reasons why OCF has supported the governor's early childhood legislation in the last legislative session, to create a more robust structure around the state to direct and organize this work, because we know that we can be doing better in addressing this problem and it being upstream on this issue. I can promise you from my own experience that we cannot fix this problem from the back end. You cannot effectively bend this curve at its end. Our best opportunity to make a difference is in the beginning, at the front end, where the dollars are the lowest and the most effective. One of our promising programs to help in this area that OCF has been engaged in, we call Boomers and Babies, which is sort of a funny project, but you may have heard about it. The project grew out of an urgent need for more quality early childhood programs in Oregon. There are long waiting lists for good programs and often scarce resources to respond effectively. At the same time, here we have an astounding number of boomer-age adults retiring every day, many of whom are searching for meaningful ways to help in their communities. Linking these talented adults with early childhood programs was a perfect strategy. And the project, again, has every type of partner involved. The Atlantic Philanthropies, which is a national foundation, and other local funders, including the Wan Young Trust, the United Way of the Columbia Willamette, the PGE Foundation, as well as Knowledge Universe, a for-profit provider. And the on-the-ground programs themselves are beginning to form their own effective partnerships. Two of OCF's oldest Boomer and Babies programs, Adelante Major in Forest Grove and the Family Nursing Center in Medford, are partnering with other organizations in their communities to get more boomer-age volunteers. Last year, these two programs added 62 new volunteers and kept almost 100% of those who were already helping. It's a creative solution to a significant problem, and one that OCF believes has great promise. Now, most of you know that Oregon has embarked on a very aspirational goal in dramatically increasing the number of Oregonians who will graduate from high school and will complete some post-secondary schooling or training, whether it's a college or technical degree. We call it, and I'm sure you're all familiar, the 40-40-20 plan, and we've heard a lot about it from a lot of sources. But part of that effort is to build an expectation and an opportunity for students to believe that they can, in fact, work hard and navigate through the challenges of the post-secondary education system. OCF has made significant grants to assist with the necessary educational redesign efforts, again partnering with a wide variety of public and private entities to make that happen. But one program that OCF has been active in for almost a decade is the Aspire program. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. In 1998, OCF started the Aspire program, a program that trains volunteers to work with high school students who want to go to college or to get career training, but don't have the information, the technical assistance, or simply the plain encouragement to do it. Aspire mentors work one-on-one with students throughout the year, help them with information about college options, admission, and financial aid. From just 4 pilot schools in 1998, Aspire today includes 115 schools around Oregon, engages 1,000 volunteers, and reaches over 11,000 students. It moved from being an OCF program to a program operated by the Oregon Student Access Commission, and is another fine example of leveraging and networks and pulling together like-minded, mission-driven organizations and volunteers. One of the more challenging issues facing Oregon is the demographic shift that Oregon is experiencing. Almost a quarter of all of our kindergarten students this year are Latino. If you look at census data for Oregon, you'll see that this part of our population is growing faster than any other. And yet the challenge is that when one looks at the educational achievement and poverty issues, we are getting failing grades with the same population. Less than 50% of Latino students are completing high school in many districts around the state. If we don't do something to address this issue, then all we need to do is sit and wait and watch the situation that we have happening 12 years from now and for many years thereafter. We simply cannot afford that outcome as a state for many, many reasons. 10 years ago, recognizing the rapidly growing Latino populations in their area, members of OCF's Willamette Valley Leadership Council asked OCF to fund a project to help build bridges between culture in their community. With the prompting of one very persuasive Leadership Council member, the Latino Partnership Program was formed. This program has developed a cross-cultural partnership, strengthened Latino-led nonprofit organizations, and established stronger community relationships. One of the first grants that we granted relative to this project was to the Salem-Kaiser Coalition for Equality. It was a group of Latino parents who really desired to be more involved in their children's education, but were struggling to understand how to navigate the complexities of the school district and the way it functioned. OCF became aware of this group and granted money to the coalition, which helped them both understand how to navigate the process and to give them credibility that they needed to be heard at the district level. The Latino Partnership Program is now active in Southern and Central Oregon, Umatilla County, and we're hoping to see it expand to other parts of the state as just one more effort that OCF is making in attempting to address the issues of racial disparity and outcomes in Oregon. These are all examples of the power of community philanthropy. Private citizens taking action coupled with strong multi-sector partnerships. It's the value of networks that can help OCF, that OCF can help build. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one new and exciting partnership that started just this week. Earlier this week, we learned that the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation has agreed to fund a new partnership between OCF and Oregon Public Broadcasting. The project will develop a syndicated network for local news that connects small newspapers and news organizations across the state, as well as supporting project hubs for original news gathering and community engagement in Central and Southern Oregon. We are really excited to join OPB to help develop a more robust and informed statewide rural-urban conversation, and we're really excited that we got this grant. Thankfully, in Oregon, we are a volunteering bunch. More than 33% of Oregonians volunteer. It's got one of the highest rates of volunteerism in the nation. By the very nature of being a community foundation, we are aware of the strength of what it is for people coming together. It is obviously one of our core values. With over 1,600 amazing volunteers who help us out around the state in a variety of ways, board member, committee member, grant and scholarship evaluators, and local leadership council members, we feel like we leverage the personal and individual power of those who want to make Oregon a better place. This broad level of community involvement creates opportunities for volunteers to share knowledge, ideas, and resources, and to make OCF a more powerful resource. And I think it makes us truly representative as we try to do our work. Greg Chalet, who's here today and was the prior president for many, many years and is still my personal advisor and an advisor to the board, knew that from traveling around Oregon, every community had its own character and its own strengths. He realized that in order to see and achieve the vision of the OCF, that the foundation would require deep and lasting input from regions outside the Portland area. I can speak to this personally, having grown up in Bend, where sometimes it feels in other parts of Oregon that all the decisions are getting made somewhere else. But in typical form, Greg and the board made it happen. OCF now has offices in 4 other areas around the state: Salem, Eugene, Medford, Bend, and more will come. We have 8 regional volunteer leadership councils made up of 15 to 20 community leaders from each of those regions who provide us input and serve our board of directors and inform us of both the local needs and opportunities in their community. And they are invaluable to the work of the foundation. A few years ago, in an effort to really leverage the value of those leadership councils, the OCF board decided to make very large one-time grants to each of our 8 regions. And those regions then decided themselves which projects they intended to focus on. And those projects varied over a wide range. Everything from improving children's oral health to literacy to building community schools to increasing mentoring. And we've seen some tremendous outcomes from those regions and the work that they've done as they've built their own projects and made things happen together. Now, finally, let me touch on the third attribute that community foundations bring to the table: credibility. I can tell you, as a lawyer, as a recovering politician, and as a former prison boss, it's nice to be associated with an organization that brings its own credibility to the table. In 1958, 73% of the American public reported that they trusted the government in Washington, D.C. to do what was right. By the mid-2009, only 20% felt that way. But in a national poll in 2010, 7 in 10 Americans reported that they trusted nonprofit organizations more than they trusted either the government or business to help solve society's problem. This share of public goodwill and trust is something that OCF takes very seriously and something that we don't believe we can compromise. And it is that trust that allows us to do the things that other sectors can't. To take risks when the tried and true methods aren't working, to be patient when the long-term responses will yield the best results, to convene others around potential solutions to our most pressing problems. Community foundations can and must take that leadership role. My 15 years in Salem as a legislative staff attorney, a legislator, a state agency head have demonstrated to me that it is almost impossible to innovate from inside government. It's not that there aren't innovative people there. There are. Some of the most innovative people that I've ever worked with. But there is no political tolerance for risk-taking. And there are no resources to take a risk. And you end up where we're at and where we've been. And yet to innovate, taking a calculated risk is essential. So OCF and philanthropy in general has to be the one to navigate that critical intersection between the public, the private, and the nonprofit sector. If we do it well, we can continue to find innovative solutions that are scalable and that can address Oregon's big root cause issues. And that's certainly our plan. In conclusion, I want to say it's important to remember that philanthropy has been a very powerful force in this country. Through the power of philanthropy, we have eradicated diseases that not only crippled individual lives, but crippled the ability of society to function effectively. It has built libraries to house books that would literally democratize knowledge. And then Greg likes to tell the story of the white stripes, not the band, but the white stripes along the side of the road. Those came from a study funded by foundations and have been one of the most critical breakthroughs of improving highway safety in our country. OCF will continue to be active in convening our partner foundations, our nonprofit partners, business, government, and others to innovate, to build relationships, and to help improve outcomes. We do believe that Oregon is the geography of hope. In the first 5 months as OCF president, I want to share with you how incredibly humbling it has been for me to sit with donors and with family members of a donor or friends of a donor who has passed away and have them talk about what motivated them to give to Oregon. Many involve their children and grandchildren with the intent of teaching them the values of philanthropy across generations. It is remarkable to see people choose to give away their hard-earned and hard-won fortunes because they love Oregon and they love their fellow man. It may sound a bit sappy, but it is true, and it is an incredible reason for us to have optimism for our future. We invite you to join us in the spirit of community philanthropy. Join OCF in making a difference and helping Oregon become a better place. Our mission is to improve lives in Oregon and to promote effective philanthropy. And we are here for Oregon and here for good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Max, for a remarkable look inside a remarkable Oregon organization that you're leading. And now, if you have a written question, put it on the index card and hold it up high so that the City Club staff can collect it from you. Thank you very much. We'll get those collected, and I'll be reading at least one of the questions from up here. The first question for our speaker, as always, will be from our Friday Forum host, John Horvick, who works at DHM Research. Since joining City Club in 2004, John has volunteered on the research board, chaired the New Leaders Council, and served on the Friday Forum Committee and the Board of Governors. He is currently the City Club's president-elect. John?
City Club has spent a lot of time this last year thinking about engaging our next generation in civic engagement through both our research and our strategic planning. You've touched on this a bit, but one of the keys of any volunteer or philanthropic organization is sustaining involvement across generations. How is OCF reaching out and connecting with younger donors who may embrace a different culture of philanthropy and expect different levels of involvement than previous generations?
That's the question I get with 5 months on the job. So I would say that we certainly recognize, and I think almost every organization that involves both volunteers and donors recognizes that to be vibrant, you have to figure out a way to bridge that divide. And there are remarkable changes if you really look at the way individuals, particularly in younger generations, are involving themselves in community giving and outreach. And we're trying to figure out ourselves the most effective way to do that. We are increasing and expanding our ever-present use of social media. I have several staff here today who I am quite confident have Twittered something during the course of this speech as an effort to use. I'm hoping it's not a long line of Z's. I'll be checking the Twitter account when I get back. But I think that's just one way. The use of social media. I think also making it relevant. We are consistently looking at ways to really make it relevant. And third, I would say there is a strong pattern of family philanthropy. Of people who are trying to engage their children and their grandchildren in understanding the importance of charitable giving. And we're always working to find new and creative ways to draw in family members of people who already understand this principle and teach them that. Finally, we've got this wonderful program we call Community 101, which allows giving to be done in schools all over the state where a donor makes a gift and it goes to a classroom, and this classroom of students then spends the year thinking about the nonprofit needs of the community and responding to grant requests and learning from their own experience what it's like to be engaged in philanthropy. And it's a tremendous program, and I think maybe one of the only youth philanthropy programs that exists in Oregon.
We will now take questions from the floor. As always, we invite members to the microphone to ask their questions. Asking questions at the Friday Forum microphone is a privilege of City Club membership. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member and ask your question in 30 seconds or less. If I flash this question mark, it's an indication that it's time to wrap up your question. Also, I will read at least one question from the audience on the index cards.
Thank you very much for your talk today. I'm Debbie Lynn Molyneux, City Club member and co-founder of Changing the Game, which works with people, power, and participation. We're very much aligned with everything you've spoken about with Oregon Community Foundation today. And one of the things that we do is we work with organizations and leaders of organizations who struggle to talk with people who are different, who are not the choir, shall we say. And so my question to you is, who is it that you struggle with Oregon Community Foundation to talk to who's not part of the choir that you might need to build bridges with? So where are your challenges?
Well, I would say that we are continuing in ever-present need to continue to make sure that we are reaching out more broadly to Oregon communities in every corner of the state. We've got great examples, I think, almost all over Oregon of where we've been able to have some level of impact. But we have sectors of Oregon where we're stronger than others. And so making sure that we're reaching out and being the Oregon Community Foundation for all of Oregon is one piece of that. And all Oregon isn't just geographic. And I would say the other area where I think we are working with a lot of other foundations and nonprofits in the community is trying to make sure that we're bridging the appropriate gap with the communities of color. There's big challenges there, and those challenges, there have been several reports published here recently and good conversations that I think have been started among the foundations with those communities, and we're trying, I think, and will continue to try to make sure that we are an accessible foundation for those organizations as well, and that we're really thinking about the equity issue in all the work that we do.
Greg McPherson, City Club member. Max, the OCF came out of an era of great innovation in Oregon public policy, and I think by common consensus one would have to say that there's less innovation today in that realm given how set the political lines are. To what extent will the OCF be pushing for innovation and pursuing new public policies in the way that, for example, the Gates Foundation has been on a national basis?
Well, thanks for that question, Greg. We have a very engaged board, and if you've had an opportunity to look at the strategic plan for the Oregon Community Foundation, it's built around this notion of a virtuous circle, the idea that we make things generally in Oregon better for everybody and more sustainable when we're focused on children and families, when we're focused on education, and when we're doing something about improving the overall economic climate of Oregon and jobs in the economy. And so I think you can continue to see OCF playing a role in stretching itself further in the areas of policy around those areas that are core to our mission. We did this just in the last legislative session, as I mentioned, on two specific bills around education policy where we felt like they were significant and important. One was the general reorganization bill of the education system, and the other one was the one creating those early childhood hubs and putting a structure around early childhood. They're very consistent with our view and with the view of our board and most of our partners around what it means to actually start to make a difference in those areas in a meaningful way. And so when we match the policy up with the things that we're focused on, you'll see us, I think, take a larger step. We also are engaged in the convening role, and I think that's one of the important things that OCF has the ability to do. Because of its statewide presence, because it is nonpartisan and doesn't have an axe to grind, we can convene around some very important issues. We've done that before, and I think you'll continue to see us do that, and we hope that out of those convenings come compromise and coalition building and policy options.
Bill Dickey, City Club member. Max, you are my state representative. And,
now, folks, I don't know if that's going to be a good thing as a lead into a question or not.
I am. You touched on this during your talk, and I'm interested in it. In this supposed mistrust of government. I would consider myself, I guess, I'm in the 24% of the people that still want to believe in the good parts of government. And I guess my question to you is, do you consider yourself a bureaucrat?
I think if I would have stayed one more year at the Department of Corrections, I would have turned into one. And I actually don't think the word bureaucrat ought to be used as a pejorative. Again, as I said it before, some of the smartest, most effective, most innovative thinking people I know are serving inside government, and they're doing tremendous work in difficult circumstances with very, very limited resources. And I have a lot of personal respect for the people who do that work and do it well. And people who know how to navigate that system and still get things done are desperately needed. I would consider myself like you. I still very much believe in the process. As regularly panned as the Oregon legislature is by almost all of us, because I think it's the nature of what we do, I have great confidence in our overall system of government and in a belief in democracy. I think representative democracy is the great gift that the United States has given to the world. And the notion that we can have a representative democracy as a way to resolve our differences, solve our problems, and move our collective agenda forward is something I still deeply and passionately believe in. And I think we have the opportunity in Oregon to demonstrate that it still works. And I think there's an underlying principle at OCF that we believe by getting people together and talking about those issues and strengthening civic engagement and people caring about communities, we can make a difference.
Mac Pritchard, City Club member. You've had the opportunity to travel throughout the state in the last 5 months since you took the job and talked to hundreds of people. What are some of the most important lessons you've learned in your conversations about the Oregon Community Foundation and the role it plays in the state?
Well, for me, I think one of the things I've learned is that it's really important for us to be there and to listen, to rely on our community, our leadership council members, and our relationships and partners with people in the community, and to really slow down and listen to what they're telling us. The other thing I'd say that I feel like I've learned, and I really have been to a lot of places in the last 5 months and met a lot of people, but I am regularly heartened by the work that I see being done in small communities all over Oregon, where they're not waiting for somebody else necessarily to come in and solve their problem. They may want a little help, they may want a little resource, but they're really collectively coming together to solve their problems and make their communities a better place to be. And I have to tell you, from the world that I lived in before, you know, there wasn't a lot of unicorns and rainbows, this has really, for me, been a very invigorating experience. It has really inspired and given me a lot of hope and optimism that we are capable in Oregon of not waiting for the cavalry to come over the hill, but coming together as a group of people and deciding we want to really get in front of some of that long list of issues that I identified. And I believe there are a lot of people wanting to do that, and we're one vehicle out of many that can help make that better.
Let me ask a question from the audience. What do you think is the difference between philanthropy and social investment, between nonprofit and social enterprise, and what will OCF's direction be in addressing the growing movement behind the integration of business social approaches, social investment as philanthropy?
Wow. That's like a PhD level question. I have several suspicions about who might have written it. Well, I would say that to not have to wax on too long about that, and also to recognize that in 5 months I don't know that I have the exact answer. I'd simply say that I think OCF is going to continue to be focused on that core mission. We have seen, I think, an increasing opportunity for social enterprise and social philanthropy or social giving to make a significant difference. And it's an area that I think we need to all continue to explore. But that's probably all I'll say. And then whoever asks the question, come up and ask me really what you're asking me to respond to.
Kurt Webering, member. Reflecting on your years as a prison boss, do you think it's time that Oregon, nonprofits, philanthropy takes a look at our laws, rules, and practices which have created a dramatic increase in the prison population?
Well, thank you for that question. There is actually nationally a lot of work being done by foundations and philanthropy around this issue. Probably the strongest organization involved in asking these complicated questions is the Pew Charitable Trust, which is really doing a lot of work in this area. I do think it's time that we really consider the nature of our investment. We like, and I don't mean this in I hope no one thinks I'm being flippant, but generally we're very attracted to the notion of crime and our interest in it as a population. We watch a lot of crime shows. We love crime stuff on the news. It just drives so much of what we do, both entertainment and information, and skews, I think, to some degree, our understanding and thinking about the issue. And there are opportunities, I think, to be involved in asking some really complicated questions about how much should we be investing in this issue, and are there better investments than the ones that we're currently making. So I would say, broadly, yes. Specifically, it's a bit more complicated to figure out how to actually make that change when there are so many people who are pretty convinced they know what that they want when it comes to crime policy.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for your comments, and I really appreciate the forward-looking and sort of positive message you have about the generosity of people in Oregon. But how would you respond to the concern that our increasing reliance on private organizations and philanthropy to provide functions that once were provided by government, like school funding in arts areas and things like that, that's fragile and not a reliable way to get those services or keep those services in the schools, because something might happen to that spigot, that it's a voluntary contribution where that may not be there all the time that we think that we need it.
Well, I couldn't agree with your comment more. I think we're often careful, and I think most organizations are careful about trying to supplant services that might otherwise need to be provided sort of more generally by all of us through tax resources and other things. So it is a risk, I think, and it's a risk sometimes that organizations may become dependent when that dependency can't really exist. I think I made it clear in my remarks, philanthropy, no matter how good we get, and we're pretty good in Oregon. If you talk to Greg Chalet, who really monitors giving across the country, Oregon is 16th on a per capita basis in the amount of charitable giving we have. And for a state our size that has actually declining wages and those kinds of things, we're really a very generous group of people. But it isn't a reliable source over the long term to solve those problems. So it needs to be catalytic. It needs to be the resources that we use to learn how to do the other things better and invest those bigger, more important resources coming out of those pools more effectively.
One last question from the audience. Could you tell some stories of maybe the most touching gifts you've heard about or seen since you've been at OCF?
The most touching. Well, I'd be happy to just share an experience relative to my experience with the Fred Fields gift, because it happened while I was there. I was meeting with the trustee of the gift, and in the middle of the conversation, he reached into his pocket and handed me an envelope that contained a check for $50 million. And it's a pretty remarkable thing when you hold that in your hand and you realize that gift is going to give in perpetuity and really have an impact, not just this year, not just next year, but for years to come. On education in the arts in Oregon. It really is a symbol of tremendous hope, I think, and optimism. But as I said before, I'm equally moved by the retired teacher who comes into OCF and establishes a fund to create a small scholarship for the students at the high school that she had spent her whole career teaching at, to ensure that they have access and a better opportunity for education. And I'm a big believer in the widow's mite, right? I mean, it's not even the value of the thing, it's the representative of what the thing is that is so important. And that gift of that teacher to build that scholarship is, for me, as equally moving and as a sign of the better part of who we are as Oregonians as the $50 million check. And it's just remarkable, and it happens almost every day at the Oregon Community Foundation. It's why, truthfully, I have the very best job in Oregon.